Okay, guys, welcome back to Let's Get Freaky podcast. I'm super excited for our guest tonight. We are joined by someone that is very highly respected in the Bigfoot community, and I am super excited to have him here tonight. Welcome to Let's Get Freaky, Daniel Perez. How are you, brother? Thank you for being here, man.
I'm doing just fine, and I'm just delighted to be talking to you in the UK. And there's a tremendous interest in Bigfoot in the UK, and we've got plenty of subscribers to the Bigfoot Times newsletter uh, that get it in the UK.
Oh, 100%, man. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Bigfoot ever since I was a little kid, and I saw for the first time the Patterson Gimlin film. And I saw it in pictures. The first time I ever saw it, I saw it in pictures, and I was like, wow. And I remember asking my mum and dad, and they were like, yeah, that's real. And I was like, wow. Like, and it just, from then on, Bigfoot has always been one of my favorite subjects.
One interesting fact about the Patterson Gimlin film, which is like all I could say when you talk about Bigfoot, after you talk about the general aspects of it, it seems that all roads eventually lead to the Patterson Gimlin film.
Hmm.
And the Patterson Gimlin film was shown to the public in general on a television program in the UK before it was shown in the United States of America
No
on
way.
the BBC documentary that John Napier narrated. And I talk about this in my recent book. And then it actually wasn't shown here in the United States until a Canadian researcher by the name of Todd Prescott put it up on YouTube because he actually bought a copy of the film and digitized it and put it up on October 20th to 2021, I believe. And so the people in the United States did not see that film that was shown on television in the UK prior to it being shown in the United States. So that would be a
Wow.
trivia question. It was first shown in a television documentary by the BBC, hosted by the late Dr. John Napier from the UK uh, in, I believe, 1968, and was never rebroadcast in the United States.
That's incredible. I didn't realize that, man. Wow.
Now you do, and it was according to Todd Prescott, and I believe him because we can find no evidence. That was the first Bigfoot documentary ever. Not the
S-
Abominable Snowman, but Bigfoot.
And it was in the UK.
And it was shown first in the UK. So the PG film, as we call it, first saw daylight in the UK before it saw daylight in the United States.
That's incredible.
Granted that the scientific community and the press community in the province of British Columbia in Canada did see it late October 1967, but that was for the press and that was for the scientific community, and it wasn't really exposed to the public in general till much, much later.
Wow. So
Yeah,
how long after did it first get shown in the US?
I think it started to be shown in the US. It was wrapped around, it got into the public hands by way of commercials advertising uh, theater releases, movie releases to go see a movie. And it was the high point of the commercial, and they showed a clip of it. And so, as a boy, at about 10 years old, or 11 or 12, I first saw it on a commercial before I actually saw it on a television program. And then later in the late 1970s, I guess I saw a snippet of the Patterson Gimlin film on a documentary, a series, television series in the United States called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy.
Hmm.
And then
Wow,
it,
man.
it got rolled into several documentaries, and everyone who seems to do anything about Bigfoot always wants to do something that encapsulates the PG film.
Hmm. I can't believe it was shown in the UK before the US. That has blown my mind. That's wild.
Yeah, it's a wild fact, but true.
Yeah. Wow, man. That would be
And
a good question for a trivia question.
yeah, I all of that is discussed. If you could see my book here, this
Yep.
just came out, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, a pictorial discussion released in January of 2025. And we discuss all of that information as well as new images from the Patterson Gimlin film, from the film site and new interviews from people who were directly associated with the aftermath of the filming.
Wow, man. That was actually how I first saw you and reached out to you because so many people have already recommended that book to me. So
Yeah,
that book is doing a good job.
it's on the first printing there was 1,000 printed, and about 500 of them have already been sold. And so this is printed on heavy book gloss paper, so it's thick paper, glossy.
Hmm.
And according to the printer, who's based here in the United States, they said to reproduce pictures and images, the best thing to use is this book gloss paper. And we went with that. It's heavy stock. It's a beautifully printed book, and I'll give you a peek of some of the inside right here.
Well, that looks cool. Yeah. Interesting,
So,
man. Where can we get this book, brother? Where can I get it? Because I'm definitely going to get this.
well, right now, the Bigfoot Times, I'm the editor and publisher of the Bigfoot Times newsletter, is currently being updated.
Hmm.
So they're updating that so it can encompass this book, because I had so many things going on at one time. I didn't have enough time with getting the printing ready and getting the website updated simultaneously. So they're updating it right now so you could order it through there. But at the present time, you could order it directly through me. For the United States customers, it's $39.54 postpaid. For the people in the United Kingdom or rest of world, it's $59.54. But get this, of that amount, believe it or not, this book by weight, there's no media mail to the UK. It's all just one rate. It cost about 29 US dollars just for postage.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's why it's so, you say, man, that's an enormous price to pay, but you're paying almost half of it just on postage. And that's the way it is.
That's where they get us. That's the way.
But
But it's worth it.
we had a play on numbers. The book here is that the first 352 copies, so you could think the Patterson Gimlin film, frame 352, which everyone considers to be the best frame in the film.
Hmm.
So the first 352 copies of the 1,000 printed are called super limited edition. So they're numbered, they have a Bigfoot ink stamp, and they have my signature, and they also have a small soil sample from the Patterson Gimlin film stamp from the Patterson Gimlin film site under super heavy tape within the book. So this is
Whoa.
literally the first book in the history of Bigfoot publishing to literally have the dirt in it.
Oh, are they still available? The first 352, or are they gone?
Yes, but here's the catch. You knew we had to talk about the catch.
Yeah.
For the people who have supported the newsletter for 28, the newsletter Bigfoot Times has been around for 28 years.
Hmm.
So the first people who have option to it, the 352 copies that are super limited edition, are members of the newsletter. So if you're not a member of the newsletter, you can't get the SLE. You could only get a regular copy. They sell for the same price, but I told the members of the newsletter, I said, "Here's what I'm going to do for you." And so when the time came, they all jumped in line. And
Awesome,
so,
man.
but there are still super limited edition copies available, but they're few and far between. But again, to get that super limited edition, you have to be a member of the newsletter.
Oh man, I'm
And
gonna have to
the
join.
reviews, I don't know if you're familiar with Coast to Coast AM,
Hmm.
which hosted by George Norrie, but we did an interview with him just recently. And prior to the interview, I sent to them a review copy. So they had in their Los Angeles office an actual copy of the book so they could look at when they could interview me. And so during the interview, I mentioned to them a longtime follower of the Bigfoot in general by the name of Henry May from Mississippi had he's been at it almost as long as I have following the subject. He got a copy of the book and he said, on a 10 scale, I'm not going to give this book a 10 or an 11 or a 12. I'm going to rank it at 20. And so I told this to the host, George Norrie, on the Coast to Coast interview, and he had a copy of the book during the interview. And he just said out right out there on the podcast on the interview, he says, "I'm going to give it a 25
Oh, wow.
on a 10 scale." So I was just completely blown away.
Yeah. Well, I have
And
to say,
so,
I've heard some incredible things about this book. Like so many
yeah,
people. I'm not just saying that because you're here now. That's why I originally thought I've got to get you on the show because I was seeing so many people talking about it.
yeah, because there was another fellow that reached. I don't know if he's on Facebook, but he reached out to me via email. A longtime follower of the Bigfoot community by the name of Michael Beershed. He got his copy and he wrote immediately. He says, "This is an instant Bigfoot classic."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's what I'm
so,
hearing, man.
yeah, so this book that you're saying right now, of all the books ever published on the subject matter, is probably, and I there's of course bias because I'm the author, probably going to be in the top 10 Bigfoot books ever. Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, a pictorial discussion.
Awesome, man. And I will share the links to the newsletter, to the links to buy the book, will be in the show description. So people can go now and order that now.
Right now, the best way is to email me directly. I'll give out my email address is Perez
Mhm.
952 at sbcglobal.net. And you could order directly through me. And if you have PayPal, we can get that going immediately.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, very exciting. I'm going to be reading that for sure. So
And
you're pretty close. You're based pretty close to Bluff Creek now. Is that correct?
no,
Ah,
we're opposite ends of the state. I'm in Southern California. The
mhm.
film that was shot in 1967 is at the northern end, just below the Oregon border in the Pacific Ocean.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
forget California's quite a big place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, California is a very long state. Yeah,
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
long state. And we're on opposite ends. So it's about from my home to the film side is probably around 800 miles or so. It's going to
Okay.
take you over a day to get there.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
cool though, man.
And
I'd like.
since we're talking about geography, I'll throw this in there too. They have renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of United States.
Mhm.
So, because I now realize that many of the subscribers are all there in those states, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, all through on those coastal states, I've decided to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Bigfoot Times.
Love that.
I love it too.
That's better for me. Google has got to make that official. They've got to do that now.
Yes.
That's awesome, man. So I'd like to go back to the start for you and Sasquatch and where this all began for you. Where did you first start getting into this and where did it start, man?
When I was about 10 years old, which would be back around 1973, my parents took us to a walk-in theater. I had an older brother, older sister, and we were kind of like in the monster phase, wanting to see those monster movies like Godzilla and stuff. And it just happened to be the one we were going to see was The Legend of Boggy Creek. And so I knew nothing about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti or anything like that prior to this movie. So we go to see The Legend of Boggy Creek, and there was a narrator in the film that was talking like serious, like this is really happening in Arkansas in the Fouke area, and they called it the Fouke monster. And I was just the whole movie hit me like a ton of bricks. And so right after that movie, I went to the library and I had a library card and I explained to the people at the library that I was interested in tried to explain what I was interested in, and they kind of said, "Well, you must probably think like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or whatever." And so they directed me to books on that, and that's how I first found out about all of this. And then as I started to read, even as a 10, 11-year old, I was like, "Oh my God, these people are taking this stuff seriously. Like it's really like there really is a monster in the woods." And that's when I started to develop. And so I'm 61 now, so it's from 10 to 61 that I have enveloped the subject of Bigfoot, probably like no one else on the planet. I have the largest personal library of Bigfoot books on the planet, and I also hold claim to the largest physical files on Bigfoot on the planet.
Wow, man.
So
That's cool.
that is my distinction between all of the other people who are in this field.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
at one time I had been to, and the Canadian Bigfooter or Sasquatch researcher, Thomas Steenberg, had pointed out to me several years ago. He says, "You know, you've been to more alleged Bigfoot filming sites than anyone in the world." And I had never thought about it until he had mentioned it. And then that was true. But then when reality TV and all these Bigfoot shows started coming out on the producer's dime, they went to more places than me. But prior to that, I went to more
You was the
places
one.
than them, but it was on my own dime.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I mean, is it cool now? Because obviously we've got so much Bigfoot stuff out there now. There's podcasts, there's documentaries, there's TV shows. It's on loads of different TV channels, and it's quite a big subject now. Like, there's a lot more people
It's
seem to be interested.
it's super saturated now, and I
Hmm.
think the dynamics of the subject matter has changed greatly. It's all about the podcast. It's all about likes on social media. It's all about the Bigfoot meets and selling T-shirts and merchandise. And there's nothing wrong with that because in the United States, that's capitalism at its best. But it doesn't necessarily advance the field in terms of research and investigation.
Hmm.
So that's, I understand that people might have a marginal interest, and they said, tell one person might tell his wife or tell their husband, they said, "Hey, we could go sell Bigfoot t-shirts at the next Bigfoot meet, and we don't have to know anything about the subject, only that we're selling t-shirts." And that
Hmm.
makes us a Bigfoot authority.
Hmm.
So I go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's difficult.
I understand the Bigfoot community today,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I'm more on the research side.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I guess it has helped the subject grow. The fact that it's so out there and everyone's, there's a lot more people talking about it, which I
Yeah,
guess is a good thing. But as you say, that does mean that there's a lot of fake stuff out there as well, and fake
it's just
videos, and
right.
that can be a problem.
And the two things that you need to know about videos in general that are quote unquote alleged to be Bigfoot or whatever the case may be is the two first red flags is one, that you see the video and you don't know the location of it. That's your
Hmm.
first red flag. The second red flag is that you don't know who shot the video. That's your second red flag. Unlike the PG film that was shot in 67, by the end of that day, uh, Roger Patterson, had called the Canadian people and had told them to get the dogs down here to get on the trail, but they didn't do it. But he gave away the location immediately. And he also talked to the newspaper that same day. And so there was never, and you knew the name of the photographer or the cinematographer, Roger Patterson. You knew the location. This is all happening within hours. So
Hmm.
there was never any uh, idea of not revealing the exact location or not revealing who shot it. We knew that all that stuff before the end of the day.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that makes it quite a distinguished case. And even today, almost 60 years later, they're still talking about the Patterson Gimlin film
Yeah.
because it was shot in broad daylight. And when you put it in slow motion and you could see it on YouTube, you're starting to see like, oh man, there's all these things going on that just does not imitate or mimic a man in a costume.
Hmm. Yeah. Muscles moving. It doesn't look, and obviously when that was shot, there's no way that could be faked. It wasn't like Hollywood wasn't that great then.
Well,
When.
let's just put it this way. We talk about this in my latest book. In February of '68, The Planet of the Apes just came out.
Hmm.
And when you could see probably portions of the Planet of the Apes on YouTube, some of the scenes, and that when you because on YouTube you have that feature playback speed, and you could make it go in slow motion. So you mean to tell me that a broke cowboy from Yakima, Washington, by the name of Roger Patterson, who was not part of Hollywood, was able to produce his own fake Bigfoot that was better than what was seen in the Planet of the Apes? Come on.
No, no way. Yeah.
You could only stretch it so long before you have to say like, no, no, there's this you're looking at a real hominid that is unknown to modern science.
hmm Did you ever meet Patterson Gimlin? Did you ever meet
No, I've
any of?
never met Roger Patterson. He died before my time, but I have met Bob Gimlin numerous times, and I was a direct colleague to people such as Grover Krantz, Dr. Grover Krantz, John Green, Renee DeHinden, and all of the people that were into the topic at the time.
hmm Oh,
And at
awesome,
the
man.
time when I was sending snail mail letters to them, I was by far the youngest of the bunch.
Awesome. What do you think would happen now if someone caught a video that good of a Sasquatch now in today's world? What do you
Oh,
think would happen?
it would stir up enormous interest, and there would be a lot more people that would probably try to go to the site to investigate, and who knows what might come of it. It's just
hmm
your guess is as good as mine because it hasn't been demonstrated yet. But I think that there would be a lot of conspiracies that people would go to the site,
hmm
the filming and say like, "Oh yeah, it's this and this and this, and there's a portal here, blah blah blah," and make it out to be what they want it to be and broadcast that to social media.
Yeah. And people would be turning to the AI as well. It's AI. It's not real. You
Yeah,
get a lot of that as well, I'm sure.
and I think you see some videos on YouTube that possibly might be done by Photoshop or AI or a combination of both. That and recently, a gentleman shared with me a video that's been on YouTube for quite a while, where the subject is walking from right to left, and it has a baby in its possession. And I said again, the two things, the two red flags: you don't know where it's shot, you don't know who shot it. So even as good as it looks, be cautious.
hmm Yeah. I mean, there's a few good, well-known Bigfoot videos out there. What other ones would you give credit to that you would say are definitely legit?
Stacy Brown, Florida, that video,
Yes.
the
hmm
thermal video, without a doubt. The video that was shot in Northern California in the Redwoods in August of 95. I guess they call it the Playmate footage. And you could actually see where it goes across the screen of the motorhome in front, where it certainly appears where you see genitalia
hmm
and flopping. And so very interesting. And I went to the site shortly after it happened. So it happened in August, and I was up there in December, and it rained like cats and dogs. So it was hard to be productive. But between myself and Dr. Jeff Meldrum, we both came to the determination that on that road, which is a dirt road off the main highway, there's a big redwood tree and there's a burl on it. You could think of it like a pimple on a tree.
hmm
It's a burl on the tree, and it's at about 8 feet high. And when the subject walks by it, it's just right underneath it. So if you take the position that it's just a guy in a costume, he was damn tall.
hmm Yeah.
8.
That's a big dude.
Yeah. And let's see, what else is, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but like I said, the Stacy Brown video I'm
hmm
very impressed by. The Freeman footage is definitely from August of 92 is definitely of consideration. The only thing that bothers me is the fact that Paul Freeman shot it, whose reputation wasn't exactly sterling. But again, you got to walk that back. And Roger Patterson himself did not have an exact sterling reputation because he rented the camera and didn't pay the camera rental. And he got arrested for grand larceny, and he was released on his own recognizance. But he settled that legal claim against him, obviously, by paying whatever they had to pay, plus probably an additional fine. And when I called up, when I was researching my original booklet, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, I called up to Yakima. I won't tell you who I spoke with, but I asked that person, uh, tell me, what did Roger Patterson remind you of? And it was an immediate comeback, like a used car salesman. And so Roger had that reputation, but regardless, you just think of it, Greg Long in his book on Bigfoot, I forget the name of the title right now, but we discuss him in my book as well. But he thinks it's all fake. He just kind of, I guess his opinion was that because Roger was late on bills and he stiffed people and borrowed money and didn't pay it back, then there's no possible way that his film could be real. So I don't understand that line of thinking is that, okay, someone robs a bank. That doesn't mean that that same day they can't go down the sidewalk and see a person who lost their wallet and pick it up and say, "Hey, you lost your wallet." He's
Yeah, for
basically
sure.
saying that cannot happen, or because Roger was failed to pay his bills, that there's no possible way he could get a Bigfoot because he had a bad character.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
an opinion, and when you start to analyze that opinion, it just it just doesn't make any sense.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's not a good argument for a video being faked. The fact that the person, despite what the character of the person may be that took the video, yeah, that's
But
ridiculous.
it's kind of interesting because Paul Freeman as well in 92, uh i- inside the Bigfoot community, specifically with John Green, Renee DeHinden, Grover Krantz, and Bob Titmus, who were all active at the time in the Walla Walla, Washington area, uh, they did not have a very high opinion of Paul Freeman, and they thought he was faking things. But even though they thought that, that does not mean Paul could not get a real video.
Hmm.
So it just happens to be that some people with reputational problems got these videos, but that doesn't make the videos fake. You see what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I tend to I'm on the fence with the Paul Freeman video from August of 92, but I've been to the site, by the way, in the summer of 2022. It's the first and only time I've been there. It's actually a very good site, but it's very accessible by road. I mean, it's just right off one of the roads up there, Skyline Drive or something like that, and
Hmm.
you could get to that site. So it's pretty easy to find, and so there's a good possibility it could be real, and it does show towards the tail end of the film what appears to be possibly a juvenile that it picks up or something. And so yeah, I again, I'm on the fence, but I lean mostly in the direction that it was probably real because the more I think about Paul Freeman wasn't some Rhodes Scholar that had a lot of education. He was just a hardworking father that tried to piece together a living with what modest education he had. And I don't think at this point in time that he had the knowledge or wherewithal to fake something like this
Hmm. Yeah.
or even know how to go about it. And so I think what's in front of his camera is what's in front of his camera and probably legitimate.
Hmm. Interesting, man. It's a cool video. For anyone that hasn't seen it, you can check that out on YouTube. Stacey Brown, we had him on the podcast as well. That video is really cool. Obviously, the size of the arm is just it's incredible. Like that doesn't look like you could fake that.
Yeah, and the thing is, when that happened, the Bigfooter Cliff Barackman turned me on to their contact information. So I'm one of the few people that actually spoke with the father and the son. The father has since passed away, but Stacy Brown Jr. is still living. And when I initially talked to them, everything was just straight down the line. I never really had any question that they really did get footage.
Hmm.
And when you see on the thermal video the arm, you could also think of the IM index, which is something that science talks about, and perhaps the proportions of the leg length to the arm length is a little bit different than people. So this is why many of the eyewitnesses of Bigfoot always say that, well, the arms seem to be a little bit longer than a person's.
Hmm.
And so it probably is.
Yeah.
And we discussed the IM index in the book and the merits of it and compared to other primates of the day today and primates from the past.
Interesting, man. So you've been to a lot of sites yourself and been out in the field researching as well. Have you had any experiences with Bigfoot?
No, I've the closest, well, I can't even say it was a Bigfoot. We were in Happy Camp, California in the summer of 1980 with the Texas Bigfoot research team from the state of Texas, and we were up there. And I was sleeping in a hammock. I believe it was August of 1980. It was very hot, so I think I was sleeping on top of a sleeping bag. And someone comes running down the hill from the forest, and they wake me up. And they kind of shook me and they said, wake up, somebody's throwing rocks." So I kind of woke up, and then I could hear a rock being thrown. And then I go, "Oh, yeah, somebody's," and I just thought, well, maybe they're playing a prank. And then I thought maybe it was the person that was part of our camping group that was responsible for it, or one of the people with us that I just didn't see. And then another rock came in, and this was like within just a few feet of me. And that's when I realized something was really happening. And the rocks, to the best of my memory, were probably the size of a baseball or so. And I thought it was funny because I thought it was a joke at first. And then what I did, I yelled out, "Ook, ook." And then the reply from the woods was a long, drown, drown, drawn, a long sound that was grrr. You could just think of it like grrr with a bunch of R's, just grrr. And then after that, everything fell silent. It was just one big grrr with a bunch of R's after it. And that's all I heard. And the next day, because none of us were brave enough to go up in the woods at that time to see who was throwing the rocks, but the next day we went to investigate, nothing. Nothing. But I don't know if that was a Bigfoot, but somebody was throwing rocks. We had guns, or we had a rifle. And so that probably would have been a foolish thing to be doing as a practical joke, because had it got a little worse, like a rock hit the car or something, that I'm sure a rifle would have been drawn.
Yeah, yeah.
And that wouldn't have been a good thing to do as a practical joke.
Well, that's what I say. People like if you dressed up as Bigfoot and started walking around the forest, like chances are you could get shot if you're seen. So that would be a foolish thing to do.
And then in 1980 and 1986, I think it was 1980 or 1979, I always get those dates confused. Myself and Doug Trapp saw tracks in the Hemet area of California, which is south of Los Angeles, in between Los Angeles and San Diego. And then in summer of 1986, in the Monachi Meadows area of California, they had a sighting. I went up to investigate, and there were 13-inch tracks, about 13 and a half inch long tracks. But the only dilemma there is the tracks were in very sandy soil, so you're not seeing a distinct impression, just an impression that something had been there.
Hmm.
So it was nice to see. It kind of confirmed the sighting, but it wasn't a distinct impression. But those, I look back on my own genesis as a Bigfooter, and those two incidents of seeing the tracks in the ground made me realize that there's something out there. And
100%, man.
so that's why I'm still going. And I'm just hoping that everyone agrees that we need hard physical evidence to solve this mystery, that sooner than later, that we do get some solid evidence that would conclusively prove that this species is out there. Who knows, like Lauren Coleman and others have suggested, there might even be multiple species here in North America. It, let's just put it this way, it would not surprise me the least bit. Or like maybe like a subspecies, like where you have bears and then you have subspecies, different types of bears, because here in North America we have polar bears, grizzly bears, brown bears, and black bears, and they're all sort of related, but different types.
Hmm. And that would explain why people describe these things differently. Like people see they've got similarities, but some will say it looks more ape, some will say it looks more human, different colours, different sizes, and obviously you've got the dogman law as well. You know, could that just be another form of Sasquatch? I'm not saying it is, but possibly. You know, I don't know, but so there could
Yeah,
be many different types of these things, and that's
yeah.
why.
And it's a stretch. It's a stretch, but it seems based on what the eyewitnesses are reporting in North America, it does seem that there's a strong possibility. And I want to say that Lauren Coleman was one of the first people to postulate this idea. And when I first read about it in his writings, I thought, well, this is kind of outlandish at first. But the more I started to consume the reports, the more I realized that he's probably right about that. There's probably either multiple species or subspecies of Bigfoot here in North America.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's a bloody big place.
Oh, for sure.
Everyone thinks that North America has got people all over the place, and it's just like, just go fly over the country and realize how empty it is.
Hmm. Yeah. I remember my granddad saying that to me because before I was born and when my dad was little, he got the opportunity to move to America. He didn't do it in the end, but it was something he nearly did. And I probably wouldn't have been here if he did, so sort of glad he didn't. But he flew over. He flew over. I can't remember what part of America it was, but he was in a plane, and they were showing him around, and he was like looking down, and he just at green, and he said it just went on for miles and miles and miles, untouched land, and he was blown away by it. And obviously, there's still a lot of untouched land now in America, places where people don't go, people haven't even seen. There's a lot of that out there.
Yeah, in just in the state of California, and California is the most populated state in the nation.
Hmm.
And just for reference, just the state of California has more people in it than all of Canada.
Wow. And
Yeah,
Canada's pretty big as well.
Canada is a massive country, and we have more people just in the state of California than all of Canada. We have more people in the state of California than all of Australia. Yet, even by that metric alone, the number of people that live in the state of California, outside of the big cities of like the San Francisco Bay Area, the Southern California, LA area, and the San Diego area, is that in between, there's massive amounts of open spaces.
Hmm. Yeah.
Get up to Northern California, where many of the Bigfoot reports are, it's the housing is scattered about, and it's just like there's a lot of in between spaces that there's nothing there.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the possibility of Bigfoot is huge, and you have all these reports, and it's just like it's a real head scratcher.
For sure. I read an article recently. I can't remember where I read it, but I definitely read it. And it was a guy that he went off the grid. He basically had enough of life, decided he wanted to leave the world, basically. And he found a spot in the US where he was completely alone and he didn't see anyone for 20 years. So a man lived there on his own for 20 years. I think he said he saw one other person the whole time he was there. And that's wild to me. Like the fact that you could just go out in the wilderness and literally never be seen again. I know that happens. Missing 411, we hear that a lot of people go missing, and it's very strange circumstances. So yeah, I think a lot of the time, especially in the UK, we don't realise that the size of the US and the fact that there can be things that undiscovered things there for sure.
Yeah, and these creatures, they don't know a state boundary. They don't know an international boundary. They're just moving around where the food supply is and where it's best to live.
Hmm. Yeah. So going back to that night where you woke up and you heard the growl, was the growl like anything you'd heard before? Was it anything? Could it?
No, it I didn't hear the growl. I provoked the growl because
Hmm.
I went ook ook, and then in response, it was this big, long, drawn out grrr, and the just went on for a little bit, and then it stopped, and that's all I heard. And if that was a Bigfoot, I don't know for a fact. In 1980, at the age of 17, I had my first quote unquote interaction vocally with a Bigfoot that I never saw.
Mhm.
And if it was a man playing a joke, that was a big chance to play because, like I said, within our group we had a rifle, and they could have been shot at had it, say, thrown a rock that hit a person or thrown a rock that hit the vehicle.
Mhm. How far away were you from like houses and things like that at that time? Was
We
it?
were in a campground. There was no houses around. We were in a campground in Happy Camp, and there was no housing around. We were in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Wow. Pretty cool experience, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it was funny because one thing that I didn't mention, but I'm realizing now that when the person came down and woke me up, I forget who it was. Then I got out of my sleeping bag, or on it was so hot I was sleeping on top of the sleeping bag. I got out and I was standing there, and then he says, wake up, they're throwing rocks." And the next thing I know, another one of our party comes from this hillside, from the forest, running down to us, but he's in his socks. He's in his socks. And the first thing I'm thinking is that that's the person who's throwing the rocks. And the second thing I thought, running in your socks down a hill, a dirt hill, that you're going to stub your toe on a rock and it's going to hurt like hell. Luckily, he didn't. So he gets down, he's in his socks, and he says, "I couldn't find out or see who was throwing the rocks." And I thought to myself, that's because you're throwing the rocks. And then as the three of us are standing there, another rock comes in. And then I go, well, that eliminates this person. And that's about shortly after I did the ook ook, and then I heard the grr, a long drawn out, like a capital G and a bunch of R's after it. And it was incredible. And I just laughed because I thought it was, even today, I thought maybe it was a prank, but it's just like, if it was real, then I had a real vocal interaction with a Bigfoot.
Hmm. But it definitely sounds like that. I mean, I hear a lot of people that have had that sort of interaction, and that
But
definitely sounds like a Bigfoot activity. Obviously, the stones throwing, and
it
then the
was just,
growl.
yeah, it was just that one ook ook by me and the one grr, and then dead silence. Nothing after that. And
Could you?
that in itself was kind of like spooky.
Yeah, yeah. Would you hear that quite a lot with Sasquatch sightings? People say like the bird stopped singing, it just went eerily quiet, and then they had the encounter. You hear that so often as well.
Right.
Did you feel the growl? Because you hear that.
No, no. It was, I'm guessing, maybe 80 feet away or something, because it was coming from the woods, not from the open. Because the campground was like, the trees were not very numerous, so you could walk there freely. But when you got to the wood line, you couldn't walk freely. And that's where the sounds were coming from the woods. And the best of my memory, we had flashlights up there, but they weren't picking up anything. We didn't see anything.
Interesting, man. It's so wild because people are so lucky to see these creatures. The people that do get to see them, sometimes people might see them twice in their lifetime, and that's really lucky. Like for someone like you that's been researching this for years, you go to all the locations, and the fact that you've not seen one just shows you how difficult it is to see these
Well,
creatures.
this is it's funny that you should bring that up because the people who have claimed sightings and footprints and sounds, and that it happens all the time. And so for someone, for me, who's been on the track for decades and decades, and the most I can claim is seeing two sets of tracks, 1979, 1980, and 1986, and then the growl in 1980. That's three things that happened in my entire Bigfoot history over decades. And then people allegedly on social media say they're seeing them all the time, or they seeing their tracks or whatever. And so I kind of tend to dismiss it.
Hmm.
I just don't find it hard to believe. It's almost like someone coming up to you and said, like, I won the lotto, but I didn't win the lotto one time. I won it 5 times. And then that's when you said, well, wait a minute. Whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
You got to prove this to me. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's where you need more proof for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Well, this difficult question, but what do you think a Bigfoot is? Like, in your opinion, what do you think
Oh,
they are?
we discussed this on Coast to Coast, and my same answer is an unknown primate. Same answer that I gave them is an unknown primate. As to what it is, I don't know. Uh, Based on the size description, I would not be the least bit surprised that it's Gigantopithecus, based on the size alone, but it could be a completely undiscovered primate that there's no fossil record of yet, and there's no uh, bones that have been found in North America, which again makes the whole thing problematical. And then if you stop there, and if you think that, or if you speculate that possibly we're dealing with a highly intelligent species, that possibly they bury their dead in strategic locations where the bones can never be found, because even though we do not know they exist, I am 100% certain they know that we exist.
Hmm.
So right there is the key to the whole thing.
Yeah.
They know we're here because every time they cross a highway, they're saying this is not natural.
Yeah.
Someone has done this. And so they know we exist. And I'm sure they know they've been shot at probably multiple times, and I'm sure they're leery of us.
Hmm. Yeah. I read an interesting book a few years ago. You probably know it. It's called Enoch, and it was written by a lady,
Autumn
April
Williams.
Autumn. That's it, Autumn Williams.
But that
Yes.
later turned out to be, to the best of my knowledge, later turned out to be a hoax.
Oh
That
no.
the guy in Florida was, how can you say it? Falling in love with Autumn Williams from her television
Yeah.
appearances, and wanted to carry on some sort of communication, and wrote her all these fantastic things that were happening in the state of Florida. And she bought it hook, line, and sinker and wrote a book about it. But I don't think Enoch is worth the paper it's printed on.
Oh no. Oh.
I like Autumn. She's kind of faded from the Bigfoot scene, but
Hmm.
I think maybe part of the fact that the Enoch story kind of fell apart, that maybe she was so embarrassed she kind of faded from the scene.
Oh no, man. Only.
So,
Sorry.
but the best thing in science, or to participate in science, is to admit your mistakes and move on,
Hmm.
because the scientific community during one time, probably, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, the 1700s, they were adamant that rocks never fell or did not fall from the sky. But today we call those rocks meteorites, and it's an accepted fact.
Hmm.
Things change. So
Yeah.
I say that if you're wrong, admit that you're wrong and move on, and keep applying science to the Bigfoot question.
Yeah, 100%. Because I read the book and I thought it was a good book, a great book, I thought. But all she did was put her trust in that man, I guess.
Right.
And
And she never met him. She should have flew to Florida to meet him and to find out, is this guy legit? And she
uh,
wrapped the whole book around it.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, because she did have a Bigfoot sighting when she was a kid. I think that's
With
sort of
her
what
mom.
set. Yes.
And her mom, Sally Shepard, wrote a book about it, and I think I have a copy. And I think when she was 5 years old or something, her mom had a sighting. And I want to say in 1995 or 2005 that Sally Shepard or either Autumn was at a Bigfoot meet that I was at, and she's in Washington State, and she spoke about her childhood sighting with her mom. That I forget the details, but I have 100% confidence in that, because it's coming from Autumn and from her mom. And I knew about her mom's sighting a long time ago because it happened a long time ago. And then so when her daughter, Autumn, started repeating it, I said, yeah, I know about this, and this seems to be grounded in reality.
Hmm. Yeah, man. It's only because in that book you mentioned about them burying the dead. In the book, she said that that gentleman in Florida said that the Sasquatch would pick up a tree, take a tree out, put the body inside, and then replant the tree. And I thought that that would be interesting if that was true. But obviously, we don't know that.
Yeah, probably just someone's imagination.
Yeah. Oh man.
It was I don't know who kind of spilled the beans on that, but someone did, and so that's how we know that more than likely that it was all made up just
Yeah.
because some lonely guy in Florida was falling in love with Autumn Williams or
Man.
Autumn Shepherd, whatever her name is today.
Yeah. Man. I mean, she does sort of point to that in the book as well, that this gentleman was a fan of her show and stuff like that. But oh well,
You move on
we
because
move on.
there's plenty of other stuff out there. I
Mhm,
mean, you don't have to go very far. You could just look at the BFRO website to realize all of these reports coming in from a long time ago and even current ones. So
mhm.
there's an abundance of reports to investigate.
Yeah. How often do you get reports to you? You must be getting
No, almost never. It's
really.
I'm not the go-to guy to make reports to. I think they're better off sending it to the BFRO website where it's accessible to everyone.
Hmm.
That seems to be the go-to site. And when I want to learn about reports, I go there as well. Granted, I heard about a report last weekend, I think from the Lake Tahoe area. The guy's in his 50s. He was 8 at the time. And he said that his parents took him on a camping trip. And he says, all I remember, there was about 10 people. We jumped in a van and we went on a very long drive. And we were at a body of lake. And he says, I guess it was the Lake Tahoe area, but I was a kid and I don't remember. And that his brother-in-law, that I guess his divorce from the family or whatever now, that he said, I'm going for a hike. And he had all his hiking gear and he went hiking and he came running through the brush and got back into camp. And he said something was chasing him. And apparently he had seen a Bigfoot on a log eating a deer. And that when he stepped on a branch, it alerted the Bigfoot and it took chase after him. And he couldn't get back to camp soon enough. And so this individual by the name of Lou Castillo is a direct eyewitness to his ex-brother-in-law who came storming back to camp, who he said was bleeding and his new camping clothing was all tattered up by going through the brush, just trying to get back because he was in fear. And so the rest of the camping trip, according to Lou, he just stood in the camp because he didn't want to go hiking anymore.
Wow, wow,
So this,
man.
yeah, this happened. I think he says it happened 1979, 1980. And again, uh, I mean, it may have been a made up story or it may be a very factual, but I met Lou in person and this is what he told me. And he was a direct observer to this. And I don't think he's making it up, what he observed.
Mhm. Interesting. Another difficult question, and again, we don't know these answers, but how many do you think are out there? If you had to sort of guess.
If I asked this question to John Green when he was living in a 1995 interview with Fate magazine, which I don't think is no longer being published, but I asked him and he said there could be hundreds of thousands of them in North America. And I thought that was a very good answer because 100,000 just in North America is not a very big number. And I know that the late Dr. Grover Krantz and Dr. Jeff Meldrum will disagree adamantly with that population figure because they base it more on the black bear population and others. But Green made a comment about that number. He says for the amount of reports, and this one he was living, He said for the amount of reports that we're getting in North America from Canada throughout all the states from Florida to Washington and everywhere in between, that there would have to be a great amount of them to make up that number. And so 100,000 is not a very big number if you were to scatter them out throughout North America. In
Hmm.
fact, that's a very small number.
Hmm.
And so if someone said 100,000 is too high, my comeback would be, well, then how do you account for all the reports? Are you telling me that there's maybe 100 Bigfoot that are running all over North America, being seen in Florida to Oklahoma to Washington to Alaska, and just doing this because no, I don't buy that.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
would have to buy that there's probably populations all over the place, small population and family groups that result from all the sightings.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when I say all the sightings and footprints, all you have to do is go to the BFRO website to say, like, oh, there are a lot of reports.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, man. And it's interesting, like what you were saying earlier. These things get reported, and they look different in size, in shape, and they sort of fit the areas as well. Like sort of where you are, and a little bit further up. They get
Yeah.
described as being a lot bigger.
In terms of descriptions, let's go back to the PG film and the Patterson creature, which we call Patty. And we
Hmm.
discussed this in the book that they've kind of dialed it in based on a piece of wood that was found on the film site, that the subject, her walking height was probably around 7 foot 3 inches tall. So granted that what you see on the film has breast, the next thing, your next logical observation is it's probably a female.
Hmm.
So then you back up a pace and you said, well, okay, if she represents your typical female, what would be the typical size of a male Bigfoot in Northern California? And the answer would probably have to be around 8 feet or so. And so most people have never seen a person 8 feet tall, let alone 7 feet. But
Hmm.
I've seen Shaq O'Neal and the late
Whoa.
Wilt Chamberlain, both over 7 feet tall. And when you see a person that's 7 feet tall plus, and I'm 5 feet 7, it blows you away as to like, wow, these people are really tall. So if someone saw an 8 foot tall Bigfoot, I'm sure it would uh, really blow them away in the
Hmm.
sense that, my God, this thing is so big.
Yeah. I worked with a dude that was 6'6". He was massive to me. I mean, I'm about 5'8", so I'm not the tallest dude. But he was massive. So to see someone 8 foot, that'd be
It'd be
wild.
incredible,
Yeah.
especially up close,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
you would know that this is something that you don't want to do hand-to-hand combat with.
Yeah. Yeah. No way. Going back to when you was talking about the PG film and this the what's the word? The scene, not the scene. The 352 picture in the film. What would you call that? The slide. The 352 slide in the
Oh,
PG.
frame
Yeah,
352.
sorry, that's the word. Frame.
It's actually,
352.
according to Bill Munns and his verified film count of the film frames from the film, frame 352 is technically frame 354, I believe, but we all call it affectionately frame 352. And the reason they call it that is because it's the most reproduced film frame that is out to the public. And it's also one of the best frames in terms of clarity, in terms of the visibility of the subject.
Hmm. Is that the
And
famous shape where we see her turning?
yes, yes. And this iconic figure, almost like Marilyn Monroe over the grate where she's got her dress up. You know, it's
Yeah,
that iconic figure that everyone knows Bigfoot by.
yeah,
And it just
yeah,
happens to be it comes from the Patterson Gimlin film.
yeah. It's amazing. And as you say, everyone knows that. Even people that are not into Bigfoot know that picture.
And one thing that I discuss in my book is that forget about the man in the costume as being Patty. The tracks that were seen immediately afterwards, as early as Monday, October 23rd, just a few days later, everyone there that saw the tracks, and there were numerous people, uh, not one of them could make tracks as deep as Patty. And so Lyle Laverty, who was a timber management assistant who saw those tracks that were just a few days old on October 23rd, said that he was so impressed that whoever was leaving these tracks was extremely heavy, because he at the time was, I think, of around 200 pounds. And he says, I couldn't leave tracks anywhere near that depth. And another fellow that was with Bob Titmus, I guess it was his ex-brother-in-law or brother-in-law, his name was Harry Halbritter, and he was 200 pounds plus, and he could not leave tracks anywhere near what the tracks that he observed. And so that again told him, separate from Lyle Laverty, that whoever was leaving these tracks was extremely heavy.
Hmm.
So no one, the skeptics and the doubters, have yet to propose an explanation. How can you make those deep tracks that were happening simultaneously as the film was being shot? And this is explained again in my new book, and that was a point that is seldom referred to, but is very important, because you can make a legal and scientific connection that the tracks were being placed as the creature is walking. So it's happening simultaneously. This business of the trackway being left at one time and the film being shot at a different time, nonsense.
Hmm.
Those tracks were laid down at the same time as the creature is walking. And M.K. Davis, in his studies early on, was able to demonstrate this by a concept known as secondary image tagging, which from his he's an astronomy buff, that he was able to determine that this was happening. And you could actually see in the film frames where the trackway is. Basically, as a boat moves through the harbor, behind the boat there's a wake. And the same thing in the PG film, behind the subject there's a wake of footprints, and the camera picks it up, these indentations in the sandbar.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
those tracks are happening simultaneously as the film was shot. And so anyone who says the tracks were made at one time and then they filmed Patty at a separate time because it's all fake, that's not so.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Interesting stuff, man. I know for us, like the PG film, and for
It's
many,
all in this book.
yeah, I'm definitely getting that for sure. 100%.
And a review copy was sent to 14 Times. So I'm sure eventually it'll show up in the 14 Times review of this book.
Hmm. Awesome, man. Awesome, brother. Man, it's been an honor talking to you tonight, man. Super interesting. Before you go, I've got to ask you, because you're on Let's Get Freaky. Have you had any other paranormal experiences? Not necessarily anything to do with Bigfoot or cryptids, but have you experienced any other paranormal UFOs or anything like that?
I thought one time on a trip to Las Vegas that I saw a UFO crashing to the ground, and it was at night, and it was just a streak of light coming down to the earth. And then I described it to a fellow that I was working with, and he says, "Oh, you saw a meteorite burning up in the atmosphere." And sure enough, as soon as he said that, because I explained to him what I saw, he said, "Yeah, that was a meteorite burning up in the atmosphere." And I said, "That's it. It wasn't
Ah,
it wasn't a UFO."
ah.
So
So you
yeah,
haven't had any other experiences?
no, no, I
Not yet.
can't.
Not yet.
I've never seen a ghost or anything like that, and so yeah, knock on wood.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to. Awesome stuff, man. Well, if you ever come back to London, I know we was talking before, you've been to London for the Olympics, which is really cool. If you ever come back, man, I'd love to buy you a pint, shake your hand, and that'd be awesome, man. So if you're ever back over, and we'll stay away from the English food. We'll
Yeah,
get a burger and chips.
I don't do English food. That's one
Yeah.
thing that I just I don't. All I could say is I know that it's customary for the English people to have this type of diet, which is very ingrained. But for someone from the United States, it's just like I see that, and that's just like I said, what are my options other than this?
What was the food? Can you remember what it was? What they were offering?
I want to say there was beans as part of it and
Okay.
something, because Paul Vella was eating this, and the late Paul Vella, and just took to it like a duck to water. And then I told him, well, what else is on the menu? And so I got something very basic that I could understand. It was like a meat and some bread and a drink. And that was it. Because the rest of the stuff I couldn't do.
Was that a breakfast? Because beans, a lot of people
I
have beans for breakfast in the
I
UK.
want to say maybe it was a late breakfast,
Okay, yeah.
something like that. But like I said, he's from the UK, and so this was proper for him to eat. And for me, I couldn't do it.
Well, for me, I'd prefer burger and fries as well. So I'm with you, man. But Daniel, I've loved talking to you tonight, brother. Thank you so much. You're welcome back on any time. I'm super excited to read the book. People need to go out and get it now. Order it from you directly, and or I'll share the links where they can get it, or they can get in touch with you. But thank you so much, man, and thank you for doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me. And so enjoy whatever time it is in the UK. It's still daytime here, and I'm
Oh,
gonna have some dinner.
nice, man. Well, it's 1:15 in the UK AM, but
It is 5:14 p.m. here in Los Angeles.
man, well, I live on American time anyway, so I'm used to it, man.
Yeah. Well,
But
thank you for having me, and best of luck.
it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch and talk again because that'll be great. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Make sure you go out and get Daniel's book. It sounds amazing. I know I'm going to be getting it. We'll be back very soon for more freaky conversations. In the meantime, stay safe and keep it freaky. Bye for now. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, I'm tuning out.
Thank you.